Good morning. This will be the meeting of the Board of Public Works and Safety for September 20th, 2017. First order of business this morning will be approval of the minutes from the meeting held on September 13th. I'd like to make a motion we approve the minutes for September 13th.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes for September 13th meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So carries. Next item, any items of business from police and fire? I'd like to skip down on the agenda at this time and go to board business. I have a memo here from Chris Hall about an unsafe structure at 1005 North Apperson. Chief Hall, would you explain?
Good morning. I just need to make a statement real quick. On Monday, September 18th, the Division of Building Inspections was notified of a problem property at 1005 North Apperson that required immediate attention. Upon investigation, we found it necessary to take emergency action concerning the property in order to protect life safety or property per IC Code 36-7-9-9. My office has condemned the property and believes it an immediate danger for any persons who may want to occupy the premises. Building Inspections has notified all known persons with substantial property insurance of the immediate danger. I also want to let you know that I will follow up with the board within the next 30 days on this property.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We'll be going back to new business now. First item under new business will be consider the release of retainage for CSO 49 Part 2 Elimination Storm Sewer Project number C1603-1A. I have a memo here from Mike Dahlquist, who is the sewer systems manager. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'll drop down here to pay estimate number 3 is from January 2017 to September 11th, 2017. The total amount of pay estimate number 3 is $13,686.90. This is the final pay request for this project and project completion. The original contract was awarded to Keith Sullivan Excavating on August 24th, 2016 in the amount of $243,132.20. Therefore, I recommend that the Board of Public Works and Safety approve pay estimate number 3 in the amount of $13,686.90, as well as release of retainage in the amount of $11,301.67, for a total of $24,988.57 to Keith Sullivan Excavating. I'd like to make a motion we approve the final pay request for
Go ahead.
E1603-1A.
Cal, second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the request. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Next item will be consider pay request number 3 and the release of retainage for CSO 49 Elimination Sewer Project Part 1, Project E1603-1A. Did I read that backwards? Okay. I have another memo from Mike Dahlquist attached as a breakdown sheet for pay estimates received and retainage. These documents reflect retainage held for the above referenced project for contractor Dykeman Excavating Company and Engineering Department. A total of $93,430.85 retainage is due to Dykeman Excavating Company. The original amount was $1,976,201. The actual contract amount at this time is $1,868,616.99. The total amount paid to Dykeman Excavating Company was $1,775,186.14. Therefore, I recommend the Board of Public Works and Safety approve the release of retainage in the amount of $93,430.85 to Dykeman Excavating Company. I'll make a motion that we release the retainage.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to release the retainage to Dykeman Excavating Company in the amount of $93,430.85. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda would be a request by Zayo Group LLC for a waiver of Resolution 2017-06. This will be a public hearing. Is there anyone here present that wishes to speak? You want to come forward? Right. Would you please state your name and address?
Yes, good morning. My name is Leonard Strickland with Zayo, and I'm out of Indianapolis, Indiana, 657 Ralston Road.
Okay, thank you very much. You have the floor.
I prepared some documents that I had sent previously, and I don't know if that was handed out to you, but it kind of explains a little bit about who Zayo is and what the small cell project is. I'm happy to be back in Kokomo. We had a great project that we kicked off here about 3 years ago, but a little saddened by the outcome, I guess, of the Senate resolution that went into effect this year. That's now brought us into having to apply for waiver programs. One of the things I wanted to highlight in the PowerPoint presentation that I had is the various examples and samples of small cells. We have a whole mix of flavors, as like what I like to call them, in menu items. We worked really closely with the engineering department previously to pick one that would work and one that would fit every given solution. So we have wood poles, metal poles, we have light poles. We are able to go co-located on existing utility poles if the power companies allow us to, as well as city infrastructure. So we have lots of different opportunities and options to proceed with this small cell deployment that we'd like to do here in Kokomo. And I also know that currently there's construction already underway from another company of ours. I call them friend competitors. They're a competition company of ours, but they're also doing the exact same project. They seem to have beat the timeline, I guess is what we can call it. Whereas we were working with Carrie Stranahan with the city to come up with some form, fit, and function for the small cells for the ones that we have currently planned here. And then we got caught up in the moratorium that came up. And so as a result of that, our project was delayed. So what I'm here today for is to answer any questions that you may have in regards to small cells, and plus learn a little bit more on what Zayo as a company has to do to continue the great relationship that we have with the city and move this project forward.
Okay, I think everyone received the information prior.
Okay.
Did you have anything that you wanted to add to what you had previously sent to us?
No, it's just the thing I really wanted to highlight was those last, I think it's 10 pages of the PowerPoint presentation that shows the different variations that we have. In the town of Speedway, as an example, we've done a remove and replacement of existing city streetlights, and that's been very beneficial. The only difference is instead of the light pole being 15 feet tall, it had a little bit more height to it. But we work really well with the power companies as well as the city to make sure that that's a pretty seamless transition. So it's a nice remove and replacement. In the city of Lafayette, one of the options that we presented to them was that we can make all of our small cell streetlights. So we converted all of our small cell designs over to a tapered steel pole with street lights attached to them. The nice thing about the street light is it is a metered service, so the power is paid for by us. And if there's ever any maintenance or any service required on those street lights, we're on call for that. And since it's a critical part of our infrastructure to support both our fiber network as well as the wireless customers that we currently support, we usually have a call out within 24 hours. The town of Speedway and the town of Fishers have both said we're more responsive than their own street department is on making sure that those street lights are up and properly functioning. We're also currently working right now with the city of Indianapolis to work on integrating small cells onto the existing traffic lights. Because one of the things that you'll see in our design is the need for small cells is predicated upon its users. There is Kokomo is a growing city. It's a great thing to see. There's a lot of new infrastructure going in place, and the demand for wireless enabled devices is really truly draining on the available wireless network that's out there. So what small cells do is small cells feed that niche that help alleviate some of the pressure that's on the large scale macro towers. Because if small cells continue to be denied, then what you're being forced into is degraded, I'm sorry, blew that word, is really bad cell service. And then the push for the wireless customers, wireless companies to come back in and request to build more macro towers. So then instead of a utility pole with a street light on it or a decorative street light, you're being asked to give up the clear space, I guess, of your skyline to have 100, 200-foot tall cell towers put in place. Those are a needed part of the infrastructure. So these macros do serve a need, which is what we call the larger small cells. But again, the small cells themselves are smaller. They're made to fit onto existing utility infrastructure, and we try to work really close to make sure that we blend them as seamlessly as possible. So if there's a lot of wood poles around the area, we'll use a wood pole design. If there's a cityscape, we've done some really good cabinet designs that we can put on the ground with smaller type of antennas that we can put on infrastructure as well too, and try to blend those in. We've been real successful with those in downtown Louisville as an example. So again, we just really wanted to make sure that we continue to make sure that the city stay aware of the drive that's doing this and the reasons why these are required. And again, we'll hear a lot more probably in 2018 about the drive for 5G. And we've had some pretty successful deployments this year with some beta trials, and AT&T has already announced and Verizon's announced that they plan on some larger scale 5G type rollouts in the next couple years. And that's a great thing because it's going to be a requirement for a lot of connected cities. And the more we use our cell phones and our iPads and our other wireless devices, even there's talk about Uber and driverless cars and stuff like that, it all uses this cellular network that we're all dependent upon right now. So one of the things I try to push forward is that small cells is just as important as your light pole, honestly, because without your cell phones, a lot of us feel kind of lost without them. And that's how we stay connected to our friends and family, and that's how we do our business every day as well too, is on the wireless networks, and especially when we're out and about. I know first responders were in here previously. A lot of police and fire department are depending upon E911 networks, and now that Indiana has text E911 established as well, I think that went into effect on January. Over 90% of all E911 calls come over the wireless network. And the last thing you want is a bad signal or a dropped call or something like that when you're trying to make an emergency call. And again, that's the reasons for small cell deployments. And we just want more of an opportunity to work with the city, work with the Public Works Department to make sure that small cells are thought of part of the city infrastructure and not just some obscure technology that might be muddling things up or making things difficult. So with that, if there's any questions or anything like that, I'm available to answer.
I don't have any at
I
this
don't
time.
either.
Do you have any, are there any existing structures in Kokomo?
We currently have 5 small cells that we deployed a couple years ago, and they're around the Delco facility. And they've been up and running operationally for over 3 years now. Part of what we did, and that is a perfect example, was when we worked with the city engineering department, they said really the last thing we want is more cables and stuff like that crossing the road. So we changed our design and made sure that the fiber that we use to feed our facilities, as well as the power cables that we use to feed those facilities, were placed underground. So then that way we weren't adding additional cross utility structures.
And you gave examples of Speedway, Lafayette. You mentioned Fishers as well.
We, in the PowerPoint presentation that I presented earlier, there's an example of how we took an existing city street light. It was a green fluted decorative pole with double luminaries on it, and we changed that design into one that would match a small cell and meet the form, fit, and function for our small cell design. So we included a picture of that as well too, of how we did a really good job of blending that in as close as we could, when you're talking usually a 39-foot structure. But our typical height that we like to have is around 30 to 39 feet. So we give some opportunities when we work with the cities as well as the homeowners associations, because a lot of these are near entrances into HOAs and large-scale neighborhoods as well too. We like to go where the people are at, because that's what's driving the demand. So we currently have over 250 structures in Indiana alone. Lafayette, West Lafayette, a few here in Kokomo, Fort Wayne, Greenwood, Evansville. So we have some rather large deployments that we've got planned for the rest of this year as well as next year too.
How many applications since the General Assembly decided to enact this new legislation?
Everyone now has gone back to actually the way it was about 4 years ago. So what this has done is we've kind of taken a step back. When we first started deploying small cells in 2014 and 2015, nobody really knew what it was. So we did a lot of variances and exceptions because most of the rules and regulations and ordinances covered macros. So there was requirements for stealthing and fencing and stuff like that, and it's you don't typically have that type of infrastructure in your right-of-ways. So we worked a lot with the cities to get those small cells adopted into the right-of-way footprint or right-of-way program that we could work it with a normal right-of-way permit with some exclusions. We had a real good run until the underground kicked in. Which was initially set up as a way to help give neighborhoods that don't have existing vertical structures an opportunity to say, hey, we don't even have a street light in our neighborhood. Why would I want, a whole bunch of, 40-foot, utility poles all through my neighborhood now? So that's actually what that was done for, but it was one of those last-minute things. And I had a great conversation with the senator at the Indianapolis Speedway who initially wrote that bill, and he definitely said that was not what was intended when we had entire cities and in a lot of cases entire counties designating themselves as underground only, because then I felt that would create a whole lot of waivers and variance exceptions from everybody, because now with everything having to be required to be underground, the way we interpreted that ordinance meant that power companies, AT&T, Frontier, phone companies, cable companies, everybody would have to go and request a waiver or a variance to install new infrastructure, which is required to support, the populace. So it was originally meant for that, but I think it's kind of morphed into everything. And then I've had a couple cities who have said, oh, well, those are critical infrastructure, so they don't have to apply. Well, that's not even the way that the underground ordinance was read when they did it. It came across to our interpretation is that anybody who wanted to install any type of utility structure above ground would have to request a waiver. So now we've basically come full circle to where I'm now coming back and going back into the cities again and requesting waivers and variances and exceptions to allow for small cells to continue to be deployed. And again, to a large extent, we just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that our goal and our objective is not to go out and set 10 utility poles at every intersection as well too. That's why the designs over the past 4 years have changed. We now have, like I mentioned previously, we have street lights that we can do. We can also mount to existing traffic light structures. So we have to work with the Department of Transportation for the state, as well as those utility structures that are owned by the cities and the counties. So we're willing to work with anybody and everybody, but we just need that opportunity to sit and discuss it and work through it.
Sure, and I appreciate your answer, but I wanted to know which cities that you have actually submitted applications since this happened.
Fort Wayne is the one that I'm also currently working right now. Kokomo obviously is in, and also West Lafayette. But from my understanding, over 80% of cities and towns within the state of Indiana adopted the underground ordinance that was requesting of waivers. So everybody got on it very quickly. And we understand that there was a lot of issues, because there was one city in particular that we were working with. They called me up and they said, hey, we approved your small cell, Leonard, and we came out the next Monday and we have 500-foot tall steel poles in our right-of-way. And I said, well, those aren't mine, and I don't know, you guys approved them, so take a look, But that's the thing that we tried to understand, and we knew that was what a lot was going on with that, was to try to prevent basically a macro-sized infrastructure in your rights-of-way. But again, we worked with most of our cities and towns to make sure that we were meeting all the current restrictions and guidelines that were put into place. I'll use Fishers as an example. When we worked with Fishers on their first ordinances, they put a distance restriction in that no small cell could be within 1,000 feet of another small cell, regardless of who the carrier was or who the customer or the company that was deploying it. They also put height restrictions in. So they put a height restriction in of nothing more than 50 feet. So again, that was where we worked really closely with the city council and their public works department as well too, and their deputy mayor, to come up with something that would match what they already had in place, and also worked very closely with their business development teams to make sure that we were helping to give them something that they could talk about as a connected city, as an example as well too.
Okay.
Any other questions? Any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak on the issue? State your name.
Good morning, I'm Kerry Stranahan. I'm the city engineer for the city of Kokomo, 100 South Union Street, Kokomo, Indiana. And we're here today because Zayo Group has requested a waiver on a permit denial from my office. A permit was applied for several small cell sites, and I wanted to explain to the board and the public as to why that was denied and what needs to happen to move forward. The statute that has been referred to is Senate Enrolled Act 213. It was passed by the legislature in the spring session and signed into law. This is the statute that the city had to react to within a matter of days in order to be able to address this type of infrastructure. I want to spend a couple minutes and explain this is more than just one company requesting a permit for a few small cell sites. As Mr. Strickland explained, there are multiple companies that do the same thing as Zayo, one of which that he referred to did obtain a permit back in March from my office for an installation of several facilities, which we did work together to create a design that I felt was acceptable and met the city's interests. At the time, we were also received a permit from Zayo just after that and requested that Zayo meet those same requirements. And in the process of updating their plans, this statute came about. And as soon as the statute came about, we realized that our ability to regulate these facilities was going to essentially be drafted into a statute, and we were going to lose any discretionary opportunities that we had to dictate the design, location of the facilities. So I want to go through quickly and address the issues in the statute, and I understand that there may be changes to the statute in the future, but this is the statute that we have to live under today. So the first portion of it discusses the installation of this type of equipment on existing facilities. As Mr. Strickland explained, they do have an opportunity to co-locate with other utilities. They have a license agreement to co-locate with Duke. That is not what this application was for. It wasn't for application for co-locating facilities. It was for new poles. The city has no authority, according to the statute, just read right from it, construction, placement, and use of small cell facilities. A permit authority, which would be the city of Kokomo, may not require an application or a permit for or charge fees for any of the following. And item number 3 is the installation, placement, maintenance, or replacement of micro wireless facilities that are suspended on cables strung between existing utility poles. So the city has, according to this statute, no right to require an application or a permit for the installation of this equipment on existing infrastructure. And utility poles, unfortunately, includes the definition of utility pole in the Act includes poles owned by the city of Kokomo. So my interpretation of that is that any small cell wireless facility can obtain or install equipment on the city-owned infrastructure without even requiring an application from the city of Kokomo. There are certain things that we cannot regulate. Mr. Strickland mentioned working with the city of Fishers to establish distance and height requirements. Those, according to the statute, cannot be regulated by the permit authority. The placement of a small cell facility and the associated supporting structure in the public right-of-way is considered a permitted use and is exempt from local zoning review if the total height of the structure supporting the small cell facility does not exceed the greater of 50 feet or the height of any utility pole in place on July 1st, 2017 within 500 feet of the proposed small cell facility plus 10 feet. So within 500 feet of, in any location, a wireless utility provider has an opportunity to install a pole at least 50 feet tall and up to 10 feet higher than the closest pole within higher than the tallest pole within 500 feet. So if there's a 90, in our just south of downtown, we have transmission lines that are 90-foot poles. The city cannot prohibit, if we did not prohibit all of them through the Board of Works resolution that was passed at the end of April, we could not prohibit the installation of a pole 100 feet tall within 500 feet of any of those infrastructure within the city right-of-way. There are other things that the city cannot do. We can't limit the placement of a small cell facility by minimum separation standards or maximum height limitations. We can't impose unreasonable requirements regarding the maintenance or appearance of the small cell site. So we can't require a wood pole, we can't require a metal pole. We can't require a street light. We can't require any screening or landscaping. The condition to grant the approval on the applicant's agreement to allow, we shall not do this. Condition the grant of the approval on the applicant's agreement to allow other wireless facilities to be placed at, attached to, or located on the associated wireless support structure. So we cannot require, if these were to be installed, we cannot require that they allow co-location with other facilities, meaning that Zayo is installing infrastructure, say for Verizon, and another company wants to come in and install infrastructure for Sprint or T-Mobile or AT&T, we can't require them to use the same pole. So to say that there's one pole every 1,000 feet, there could be 4 poles every 1,000 feet for every wireless provider that's out there. We cannot prohibit an applicant from locating a small cell facility, wireless support structure, or utility pole in a residential area. So we cannot prohibit the height of the pole, and we can't prohibit the location of the pole within a residential area. Therefore, not to say that any utility would do this, but we cannot prohibit the installation of a 50-foot pole in somebody's front yard. A 50-foot wood pole in front of somebody's front yard. There are certain things that the city cannot require on the installation of this equipment on city-owned infrastructure, on city utility poles. If the wireless provider wants to install those their equipment on a city pole and it doesn't meet their structural requirements, the city is required to make what they call make-ready work, meaning that we are required to replace our infrastructure in order to meet their needs. Now, there's an estimate process and there's a cost process that we get reimbursed. However, we cannot get reimbursed for any engineering fees. So if I have to hire an outside consultant to design a piece of infrastructure, that's not reimbursable. Those are some of the issues that we faced when we looked at this ordinance. And I want to address a few other issues that I see going forward with this. From Mr. Strickland's presentation. First of all is that Zayo does have a contract with Duke Energy to co-locate onto their facilities. So that is a viable alternative. However, they only have the ability, according to the presentation, they only have the ability to install the antenna, not any equipment. Earlier in the presentation, it was noted that the equipment is 650 pounds and may require a pole to be replaced, which is allowed under our has to be allowed under our Board of Works resolution that prohibited overhead wiring. Also, I believe that 650 pounds includes all the equipment, not just the antenna. So if only the antenna is on the pole, it's a significantly less amount of equipment that would have to go onto a pole, and perhaps those poles the existing pole would suffice instead of a new pole structure. Let me flip through my. One of the statements in the presentation was that small cell sites are quicker to market, more acceptable to local residents, and to have a higher return on investment. That seems to me that there's some flexibility there with the installation method. Having a higher return on investment versus a large site would give you the indication that issues like replacing existing poles to meet the structural requirements is feasible from a financial perspective. One of the other. Let's see if I can find. Oh. With Zayo's submittal, there was a statement for verification for a set of responses, one of which was the statement was made that each existing utility structure each existing, which would be the existing wood pole, metal pole from an existing utility, has a set load limit. To add close to 650 pounds of additional equipment to an existing pole or one that already has wireless equipment on it would result in structural overload and would have to require that poles be replaced. However, because Duke only allows the antenna and not the equipment to be on the pole, it may allow for those poles to remain. One of the things that really concerns me in the future, so the spacing on this equipment, the statement says that small cells operate within a given design network can vary. The spacing within a given design network can vary from 500 to 2,500 feet. For the purposes of understanding, giving that a distance, a city block is about 360 feet from center line to center line. So it's a little bit larger than a city block. However, the 5G transceivers that will be coming into our infrastructure in the future perform better with separation distances of no more than 300 to 500 feet. That's every city block, and that's 3 to 4 antennas for each wireless utility provider every city block in order to fill in high trafficked areas. So you can see how the density in the future is going to increase. And this is just the first application of what could be, you could pick a number of what could end up being out there, and not being able, we have only two options. We can either prohibit the installation of overhead utilities, which would prohibit the installation of this type of equipment on new poles, or we can regulate them only to the extent that the statute allows us to, which I believe does not meet the city's best interest. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Beth? I don't believe we have any at this time.
Okay.
You may want to counter. Give me 1 second. Do you want to say anything in response? In this case.
Just as a response here, the only thing I would say is, thanks again to Carrie for his very thoughtful replies, and I do concur with a lot of what he said. The one thing I want to stipulate is that when we did make notifications about like 5G as an example, some of the equipment that we've seen when it first came out was running around 50 pounds a piece. The next generation equipment's already being worked on right now, and it's been cut down in half. As far as how many carriers per block, again, it's new technology. It's yet to be determined, but as Carrie did mention, it's coming. The last thing to point out is that as far as co-locations go, as I mentioned, we're not opposed to co-locations. Duke does regulate that we can only currently right now put the antenna on their pole. If there's no pole clearance, in other words, if there's a neutral sitting on the top of that pole, then they have to switch that out for a taller pole to give us the clearance for the antenna to be placed above that. And then what that means is all of our support equipment would have to go into a ground cabinet. So in a lot of our permitting and designs that we do, if Duke Energy is the primary utility company in the area, that's the reason why we do submit standalone poles, because again, it's that which do you want? The city really doesn't, a lot of the cities that we work with, they don't want additional cabinets in the right of way. So they would prefer that they were on the pole. And plus the ground cabinets, they have a little bit more size to them as well too. So when we put our own standalone pole, is what we call it, or a brand new utility pole, the cabinets are all mounted on the pole, so it clears that of any right-of-way obstructions, other than, of course, a utility pole that's in the right-of-way, which we're all used to, and what we all see now anyway. And then again, it gives us the benefits of getting that up and away from the city infrastructure. So mowing, sidewalks, road work, whatever it may be, we don't have a ground cabinet in the way. And also, like everything that's in the right of way, it's all subject to strikes. So having a utility pole in the right of way versus a cabinet in the right of way, there's a lot of issues pertaining with that as well too. So again, that's the reasons why that we try to get them on the pole. But again, each one is predicated upon what the city infrastructure looks like and what we come up with when we work with the city engineers and the design groups as far as a viable solution for each one of these. So.
Has there been a request to co-locate on any other pole besides Duke?
Well, we're currently working right now with the city of Indianapolis on an attachment agreement for their infrastructure.
Forgive me, in Kokomo. Have there been any, there are other poles that, besides Duke, poles in Kokomo. There's city traffic lights.
Yeah,
Or
we
there's-
we can't regulate city.
But has that been asked?
There's been no request.
It would depend on who those poles are. Like currently right now, we are working with the Indiana Department of Transportation to attach to their facilities. So their traffic lights, their towers, their building infrastructure and such that they have. If there's other utility pole owners, traffic light owners here that I'm not aware of, I'd be more than happy to work with the engineering department and come up again with some more viable solutions and some alternatives that we can work with.
Yeah, this is certainly not my bailiwick, it's more of the engineering departments, but if somebody is currently constructing, which is what we were told earlier, that a friendly competitor, I don't know how that infrastructure works, but if you're open to co-locating,
Their application was on the opposite side of the city.
I understand, but if the pole's already going up from a co-competitor,
Well, each one of these are in different areas. So where we're currently working at, in the company of record, I believe is Extenet, where they're working at is it's two different locations, two different areas. So one of the things that a lot of times we provide is to kind of give an overview, and I did that as well too, with kind of like a screen grab of where it's at, and you can see what we're trying to target. We're hitting the businesses, we're hitting the commercial developments, we're hitting the malls, we're hitting the major intersections and the main thoroughfares, as well as those entrances into the neighborhoods, so that people don't have to go out on their driveways and use their cell phones or stand at a window, that type of thing, because we like to go where the people are at. As far as co-locations go, Zayo has, again, and to Carrie's points, co-location hasn't been enforced as much, but I know it's been more of a requirement as we move forward, and Zayo has always made it pretty clear that we are not opposed to co-locations. There's a lot of additional requirements on our side to make sure of interference and stuff like that has to take place. But co-location on any type of infrastructure, as well as another carrier small cell, is not out of the realm with us. And again, I like to say that Zayo, we live here, we work here, we're from here. But I fully understand the ordinances. Not everybody plays nice. But our edict has always been, since I do most of our siting is what we call it, my selection is I treat every location like it was mine. There are examples, and we've seen them in the public, in the paper and in the news of, people coming out and finding a utility pole in their driveway, or next to their mailbox, or stuck in their petunia garden, and that's unfortunate that it happens. But I'm proud of the fact that out of the facilities that we've deployed, we've had zero negative feedback as far as our placements go, because we work with the homeowners as well too. We work with the city, we work with the homeowners, we try to make everything as easy as we can for them and get them to understand. So part of it's education right up front. So we educate them into what this is and here's the requirements for it. But again, we don't want to stick it in front of grandma's picture window as well too. When she sits on her porch, she has to look at this. So we try to make sure that we're at the intersections as well as at property break lines, near other existing infrastructure, et cetera. But again, I fully understand the requirements to put something like that in an ordinance or a set of rules and regulations that does give the city the ability to say where they can and where they can't go. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Okay, at this time, I think I'm going to make a motion that we take all this under advisement so we can have an executive session with the full board and discuss it further. It's a lot of information in a short period of time. So I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to take the request for Resolution 2017-06 waiver under advisement. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Is there any correspondence, Aaron?
There's none.
Items of business from the public? Okay, I'll move to the approval of claims for September 20th, 2017 in the amount of $2,045,692.37. I'll make a motion we approve the claims.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the claims in the amount of $2,045,692.37. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. If there's nothing further coming before the board today, this meeting is adjourned.